Hi, I'm Liz, and I healed from chronic fatigue syndrome. And I've come back to share my story and the stories of others who have healed. Nothing on this channel is medical advice nor meant to contradict what you yourself have discovered to be true. But I hope by sharing our stories, we can inspire you on your journey. Jen, I'm so glad we could finally do this. I'm a huge fan of yours on Instagram.
Me too. I'm so happy.
Yeah, you always have such great wisdom.
Thank you. I love what you do as well so much. I've been following you for a long time, as you know, and back to the days when I wasn't feeling very well. And it's amazing to see the stories you share and everything. So I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful that you're one of them. So let me just introduce you. I hope I get everything right. So my guest today, Jennifer from London, who is fluent in 5 languages, was a professional ballet dancer until a career-ending injury. While studying for her physiotherapy degree, her health began to fall apart and she was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. Like all of us, she tried many different approaches over the years. And at her lowest point, she came across a new modality that was the beginning of a paradigm shift for her. So Jen has come back to share her recovery story and the lessons she learned along the way.
Hey!
Yeah, Jen, so what is your purpose for sharing your story today?
I just would love this message of hope, of shift in paradigm, like what you said, to move far and wide through the oceans and just reach as many people as possible.
That's so wonderful. Yeah. So can you tell us about your life leading up to CFS and how your health started to fall apart?
Oh, yes. So my whole life, I had been moving around the world, both for my career and my family. I grew up in Africa. I'm a tropical baby. And even there, we were moving all the time. And then when I was older, moving countries, schools. So a lot of information for a person who is growing and developing. And then I became a professional ballet dancer. I was traveling even more then. And when I moved to London, I started to experience a new side of myself, in the sense that because I wasn't dancing as much because of my ankle injury, I was finding myself working hours and hours, hustling, trying to do work in so many different areas. I've done everything, always in the realm of health and well-being, Pilates, teaching fitness, yoga, massage. But I noticed that when I started to do more and more, and as I was getting older, I was just ill all the time. I would get the flu like 5 times in the winter. Like every other month, I would get it again, and I would have a fever, and I'd have to take antibiotics. I would have wheezing in my chest. And then when I went back to university to study biomedical science, I started to have a lot of pains in my back and in my glutes. I thought I knew my body very well, so I always managed to shift these tensions and pains through physical activity, but I was in a lot of pain for a couple of years. And I noticed throughout this time also my anxiety started to skyrocket. And I was really shaky for a couple of years all the time. And I actually had anxiety when I was a child as well. I had a few panic attacks for various reasons we might get to in this call, who knows, on this Zoom. But whenever I found myself in a situation where I had to prove myself, such as studying and new environments, all my traumas would come back around being a new girl and perfectionism. And so all this kind of tied into me experiencing a worsening of symptoms, both mentally and physically.
It sounds like you had all these stressors piling up and you continued to push through, trying to achieve and hustle, as you said. And it seems like even though you had this physical knowledge of the body, that you were kind of ignoring the other aspects of health and balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was preaching to my clients the importance of balance, but yet myself, I was all over the place. And I didn't, I feel like before something like this happens, we are very much in a space of we think we can do everything, what's going to happen. But yeah, then stuff does happen.
And that's so interesting what you said. It's like we preach to others, but we're not looking after ourselves. Interesting. Yeah. So was there any specific trigger that knocked down the domino pieces, or was it just gradual?
So there was a couple of back-to-back stressors. I was increasingly for 2 or 3 years experiencing fevers with no other symptoms. So I would have a fever for a month, do all the tests and everything, and they would say, oh, I don't know, you just need to rest or something. So I started to think that I was the type of person that when I needed rest, I just got a fever for a few weeks, which is absurd. And then as time went on, there was a few things back to back. So I came down with some kind of virus and I had a chest infection and I felt quite ill after, but within a few days I was fine. And then I noticed that after this, it was very hard for me to feel better. So I would go out for walks and then I would feel tired and then my chest would hurt. And because I was in the health industry and studying physiotherapy, I was asking myself, what could it be? Maybe I have hypermobility syndrome. So I thought maybe I have EDS. Is it EDS that's causing these aches and pains and heart rate craziness? Do I have POTS? So that was happening. And then we moved house, which was quite stressful. And then a lot of anxieties in that time from my family as well, my mom, my dad, and then just everything kind of became bigger and bigger. And then one day in our new house, the first day, I was like, first day in the new house, I'm going to do some yoga. And so I did a gentle yoga practice, and the first 5 minutes, I heard like a crunching sound in my neck, and I was completely blocked, stuck. All of my muscles were really tense, and I had to go to A&E. And from there, that was the crash point. So from there, I never really recovered. So after a few days of this intense nerve pain, I started to experience a fever and then swollen lymph glands, and then it all happened.
Did they take an X-ray and find if there was something structurally wrong with your neck? Because you did say you had a crunch.
Yes. No. So they do something that's called palpation. So they palpated my spine. And from that, they said, you just have probably a nerve impingement, or we're not really sure, but it's nothing to worry about. Just go home and rest. And as the physio, I was like, okay, surely there's something that I can do to help myself, help move this pain. But nothing I did worked. And so I lay in bed. I thought, if I'm in so much pain, surely if I completely relax, it will get better. But then I think it was day 3 of lying in bed for this pain that I got all the other symptoms. At first, the doctors were saying, oh, you have this virus, you have that virus. No, you don't have that virus. Let's give you all the antivirals anyway, all the antibiotics. So for a month, I was on cycles of antivirals and antibiotics.
I understand the antivirals because I know with CFS, your latent viruses can reactivate and stuff, but antibiotics.
Yeah, so they didn't know it was CFS yet because it was the beginning. So they were trying to throw at me what they thought would work, but it didn't work.
It actually ended up making things worse.
Yes, because I knew my body after a couple of weeks of zero improvement and feeling worse and having beginning blurred vision. I was like, something is different this time. I've never really felt this before. So, like, as crashy, as bad as that, I had experienced it coming in and out for a few years, but never so intensely. Yeah, so they did lots of tests, x-rays to see my bones, CT scans, blood tests, until a infectious disease doctor said you have a fatigue syndrome. And then another one said you have chronic fatigue syndrome. And then, yes, so that was a few months after my crash. So I'd already been in bed for a few months here.
Okay, so you were bedbound at this point. You've listed many symptoms, the post-exertional crash, the flu-like symptoms, the fevers, the stomach issues. Can you run down some maybe we haven't covered and just your functionality levels throughout your journey?
Yeah, so at the beginning, I wasn't aware of the pattern of push and crash. I would be really ill in bed. My hair was falling out, blurry vision, nauseous, tummy aches, diarrhea. I lost about 10 kilos in the first few months already. Yeah, it was nice. I had rashes, I had acne. I'd never had acne, and all of a sudden my face was filled with acne everywhere. Like every inch of my skin had huge cysts and bumps. It was very bizarre. My psoriasis on my head went from a little bit, if I don't wash my hair every 3 days, to flaking. Everything that was there went times 100 plus everything else. So then I would notice a pattern of, after like 3 or 4 weeks, the symptoms would quiet down, but I would still have this underlying, I call it heat. And I had a fever the whole time for the whole year. It was not going away. And the fever is just this reaction my body had to what was happening. And there was such dysregulation in my body temperature, just wasn't able to find a balance. It just kept going up. So yeah.
Yeah, my temperature went down. So it was dysregulated. And people listening, no CFS story. No one is going to have the exact same symptoms, but there is this dysregulation that's happening that can really affect every single system in the body, whether it's one way or the other.
Yes, absolutely.
So you have a partner that you're living with at the time, or were you on your own?
Yes, so I was with my partner and he helped me a lot. So going back to levels of functionality, I would go through this pattern of being completely bedbound for 3 or 4 weeks. I wouldn't shower. If I got out of bed for a couple of minutes or walked into the living room, I would feel really, really ill. So he would bathe me, he was helping me with all those things. And then I would get to a point where I'd feel a bit better. So maybe I can go outside for 5 minutes. And then I would recrash again. But yes, he was with me and he helped me so, so, so much. I am really grateful. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you did have that support. Yeah. Did you get support from your other family members and friends, or did they not understand what was going on, like is typical?
So my family lives in other countries, in Italy and America, and my partner's family also lives in other countries. So it was just me and him, and my friends. It's interesting because they understand, or they come to understand after, especially the ones that I'm very close with, they came to an understanding. But at the beginning, I was like, but I don't know if you understand. Do you understand? And I felt this need for people to understand me.
I know exactly what you're talking about, Jennifer. I would be like, I wish you could just feel what it feels like for 1 minute, not more than that, because they probably couldn't handle it. but no one's probably going to understand unless they have it, I guess.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it felt like and kind of what happened. And yes, with family, I was very sad if they misinterpreted what I was going through. And in the beginning, I felt very defensive towards depression, anxiety. I was like, no, I'm not depressed. Like, this is not that. This is something else. I'm sick. I have nausea. I have a fever. This is not. But later, I would come to understand that there's a lot of nuances around that as well. But yeah.
Yeah. So did the doctors have any advice for you, or were you just kind of on your own to try different modalities, or both, I assume?
Yeah. So initially they said rest. And then I kind of came back with, I've been resting for a few months and I guarantee you that it's not rest that I need. Is there anything else? And at this point, I had been doing my research, but because the research that I would be doing is more in the traditional medical paradigm, it was more towards graded exercise therapy, CBT, pacing, and coming from the physio background, I know a lot about that. And so I started with physiotherapy and I started with graded exercise therapy. And after my first session, I crashed harder than I had ever crashed before. And I remember just crying, I think, for like 2 days. I just couldn't believe it. I felt so let down by physiotherapy in general, what I was doing. And just in general, I was like, how is this happening? Why? And then you go online and you see that this happens to a lot of people.
Yeah, I bet it can be crushing too, because it's like you're trying to put effort into something. You're doing your best. You're showing up and you're giving it that A+, and it actually led to your worst crash.
Yeah. I remember emailing the physio saying, oh, I don't know what happened, but what we're doing. And she said, oh, let's try and do a few more sessions. And I was like, oh, I don't think I resonate with that. Yeah, and I tried to do my own version of graded exercise therapy for a while, with my knowledge, but it just wasn't. It's now I understand why, but then my brain was like, okay, maybe if my mitochondria, I get a bit more of that. And yeah. What were
I
you
went
gonna
down the mitochondria. I was like, okay, I'm going to try to take all the herbs to kill whatever's attacking my mitochondria. And now I'm going to boost it with all these herbs to boost. I was on the boost and kill mode. And I was, because you feel at a cellular level, my cells felt like they were hurting and fatigued. And it didn't make sense, the mitochondria. And there probably is some mitochondria stuff going on.
Yeah, definitely. I also went down the whole supplements route. And, I really do believe in nutritional therapy for so many, hormonal regulation. And it's very powerful. And what we eat is what we are. We need to have the right amount of fats, the right amount of protein. And one thing that I did change was I was a vegetarian for 7 years. And I introduced meat and fish. And I must say that I really feel a difference in how my body feels after the meal. So for me personally, that was a good move. But yeah, at one point, Liz, I was taking, I don't know, like 35 supplements 3 times a day.
Oh my God. I think I was up to 40 total per day. But
Wow.
yeah, I had the war chest. I had like 2 chests next to the couch and then extra in the cabinet and then the supplement baggies. So it sounds like you were right there too with the supplements.
And to make them inviting, I had my supplement basket that was like rattan and it was so nice to look at. And I remember being like, oh, it's my supplement basket. So nice. This is going to help me. And yeah.
So you've tried all these different approaches. You've tried the supplements, you've tried graded exercise, and your body did a big nope. And you decided that doesn't resonate. I think you also tried just pacing your way through Can you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that? And what's your definition of pacing so we're on the same page?
Yeah, so pacing is, for me, and what I understand of it from what I studied, is a coping strategy to help experience the least amount of symptoms. So there's like a level of, if I cross that, it's going to be worse. So stay as much before that level as I can. There was a point where I was housebound. So I went from bedbound to housebound, and that was in the pacing time.
So you did show a small increase in capacity that's like shuffling around your house.
Yes, exactly. So instead of being really ill in my bed, I was able to come to the living room. But again, if I would stand up more than 3 or 4 times and lift something, like that was it. So my pacing, my understanding of it then was, okay, I guess my window of tolerance for this pacing journey is tiny. It's like this tiny line. I felt like I was on a balancing beam on a string rather than like on a beam. And that was my pacing levels. I had to be so careful with everything. And there wasn't a lot that I could introduce slowly. And I did this for a few months. It wasn't like I did it for a week and it didn't work. It was, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. Different things do work for different people at different stages. And also what we need ourselves at one stage can be different than at a later stage. It sounds like even though you were able to do more than be bedbound, that it almost created more stress because you're trying to walk that string and you already had lots of anxiety from this illness and then from your life before. So do you want to now talk about some of the stress prior to getting ill and how that might have been building up to where you are?
So I have early attachment wounds with both my parents, anxiety attachment on one side, and my dad left when I was young, and then he came back into my life when I was older. But I definitely did not have secure attachments with either of my parents, and a huge abandonment wound. And as a response, my brain created so many coping mechanisms for me to feel safe in my body, in my space, in my head. And these looked like people pleasing, perfectionism, high achieving, a lot of pressure on myself, anxiety, questioning whether what I was doing was right all the time, overthinking, overanalyzing to keep myself safe, to re-question, is this right? Because if it's not, something's going to happen. Fear of failure, like all these things tying into how I moved through life. And yeah.
Yeah. And I know there's parents of kids with CFS watching this. And this is not to say that CFS is caused by parents who create stress, though I don't want to, but I do want to say, like, yes, of course, that can add to the stress in your life and how you deal with stress if you had stress from a childhood, whether it was abandonment or whether it was just a lot of expectations or traumas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And to add on that, because you were asking about the stress, these coping patterns create loops of stress that you find yourself in. So let's say certain situations would make it worse, like being in an environment where I'm being judged, like university or new work or new places. This will enhance the loop of perfectionism, of self-doubt. And so the stress was really more an internal thing rather than, although there were external things, life is filled with stress left, right, and center. And I guess the goal isn't to be stress-free, it's to understand how we can enable stress to happen, but respond in a new way and be in a new way around it.
Yes, that's very wise too, because while removing sources of stress was a part of my recovery, building resilience was also essential. So now you've tried multiple modalities. When was it that you ultimately discovered the modality that would begin to shift the paradigm for you?
So I've always meditated through being a yoga teacher and just how my life was. I've always been into a lot of Eastern practices. And I started to do Qigong and I loved it. Have you done it before? I can
Isn't
see
it the one you're like this and you're tapping your kidneys?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah. Well,
I was like, I'm gonna do Qigong. I was like, and then I'm like tapping my kidneys, and I was doing it with this 90-year-old on my street corner because that was my level. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, you can tap your kidneys if you want in the practice, but Qigong is about Qi, which is the movement of breath and energy in our body. And so it started to tap into stuff somatically. I started to begin to become aware of the energy that was in my body, not only the symptoms and the fear and the anxiety, but what energy is in my body. Is it stuck? Was it moving? And from when I was housebound, still not moving into the brain retraining yet, I was doing meditation and the Qigong. I reached a point where I was able to do Qigong for about half an hour. And I wasn't moving a lot. It was more visualization, energy practices. And we know through neuroscience that using the brain in a novel experience, exposing the brain to new information, to visualization, really helps form new pathways. So I found that as I was increasing my ability to expand outside of my body imaginatively and through visualization practices, I found myself with more space and more awareness around what was happening inside me. Although I still wasn't able to really move forward, I experienced more space. And by space, I mean that thread started to feel like a rope. Yeah.
That's a good metaphor. Okay. So yeah. And I think a lot of people who end up, trying neuroplasticity stuff, which is what we'll talk about soon, did start out with maybe there was a seed. It was like meditations with visualizations or other somatic practices that end up feeling very supportive, which kind of planted a seed for doing the more focused work. So yeah, how did you ultimately then discover brain retraining as a modality for healing?
So I came across a few people on Instagram, Raylan, you, and some other people who were sharing some stories. And there was a video on Raylan's channel that was talking about how this lovely lady had recovered through something called the lightning process. And I had heard about it already a couple of times. One of my physio colleagues had a sister who'd recovered through the LP, and she told me, and I was like, what is that? And she said, oh, it's this thing. And she didn't sound very convincing. And I was like, oh, whatever, I'm not going to do that. And then I heard about it again through someone else, and I was like, oh, still not convinced. And then I heard the story of this lady, and what she said just came at the right time. As you said, I was experiencing changes because of how I was using my brain instead of how I was using my body, which was new for how I had been healing. And I heard her story and how it helped her. And I waited probably a couple more weeks to call a practitioner. But yeah, so that's where it all started.
Oh, wow. That's so wonderful. Yeah. Raylan has just an amazing channel. We're good friends. Maybe you'll be on her channel next. All right. So you now make the decision, I'm going to do the lightning process.
Yes.
How much does it cost?
I paid £1,200 for 3 days. of the
It's
seminar.
not cheap, but it's a 3-day seminar. And how many people were in your group?
So I couldn't find with the practitioner I wanted a date soon enough. And so I asked him for one-to-one, which is more expensive. So if you do it in a group, it's cheaper. But then I was like, I think I need that one-to-one. He'll understand me better. You'll guide me better. But now I understand that there's other stuff that comes into it. But yeah, so then a couple of weeks later, I was booked in with Sam, and I had my first day of the LP. And would you like me to keep talking about that experience?
Yeah, so I love to hear. I mean, some people say there is so much secrecy around it, but I don't get that impression myself. But yeah, can you tell me about the discoveries and the things you learned from it and then your experience?
Yeah, it was amazing. And at the time, I didn't know about other programs, but the course stuff is that, of brain retraining. It's using the power of our brain that it has to reorganize itself to interrupt neural pathways that keep us stuck in illness. So with the LP, which is a lightning process, you have this practice that you learn, and every step of the practice engages your brain with a visualization, with a talk with your inner coach, with yourself, and also other aspects that really help rewire the brain. And on the first day, at the end of every day, there's an invitation to experience something new or go for a walk. And I was like, are you crazy? I can't go for a walk. Well, I've been trying to go for a walk for almost a year. This doesn't sound real, but at the end of day one, you learn very fascinating information about why that is, and how when you interrupt the neural pathway that switches on the physiology, you don't need to pace yourself as you thought you did. And the question that you ask yourself before engaging in the activity is, how do I feel from 1 out of 10? And if you feel a 5 or a 4, then you haven't probably engaged in the rewiring process as efficiently as you could. So it's not advised to do anything until you feel the 9, the 10, the joy of the new state that you're experiencing. So I experienced a 9.5 on day one of feeling joy in the rewiring practice. And I went for a 15-minute walk, and I felt absolutely fine. And I was like crying, and I was like, how is this possible? I was like, what is going on?
That's amazing. So the next day, did you still feel good after?
Yeah, the next day I then went for a 30-minute bike ride. And the reason why in the LP you do this is to have proof of the work. So rather than use the practice and then connect it with neurology of being afraid of doing things, you connect the LP with the neurology of, oh, if I interrupt, I can do. And so, yeah, I never experienced any post-exertional malaise from either experiences. And on day 3, I went to a supermarket, which scared me a lot before because of the lights and the noises and the people. And I had a couple of moments when I got scared when I was in the supermarket. So I did the LP, I did the practice out loud.
In the supermarket?
I didn't care. I was like, whatever, I'm doing it because this is gonna. I did feel a level of motivation I've never felt in my life before. Like, if I do this, I can change my life. And I had proof from day 1 and day 2. I was in bed, nothing had made me feel better. And I had successfully done 2 days of activity. And I never relapsed. I never had a crash or, the exertional malaise afterwards.
That is amazing. You did say, I believe that I could change my life. So it sounds like you weren't under the idea that this coach is going to fix me, that I was given tools and I was the one going to change my life.
Absolutely. In fact, before you do the LP, they ask you some questions to see where you are on a scale of accountability, personal responsibility, readiness to believe that this is going to work. And if you're not, they do say, okay, maybe we need more time then. So I completely agree with what you said.
Yeah, I do want to present an honest, candid, and complete picture. I have seen stories where it didn't work for someone, but I would read into that. And one of the stories that was shared, it was a young girl whose mom had really pushed her to do this, to get back to school. And I don't know if just the pressure she put on herself, maybe she actually felt a 5, but went and tried to do activity anyway. When you actually did feel the 9.5 and you felt like your body could actually do that. So you weren't lying to yourself, which doesn't work.
Yes, absolutely. That is one important thing. There was no pushing. There was no, because it is important when we experience this type of illness, pushing ourselves. I'm sure you can resonate with your experience, is not useful. It's not helpful. So yes, I completely agree with you. There has to be a level of congruency, and the congruency comes when you do the LP, when you do the practice, the brain retraining, whatever it is, DNRS, ANS rewire, when you do it and it works, there are, you're right, factors that come into that, like personal motivation, belief, readiness. Like I was off at the edge of my seat before the LP started. I was really excited, and I didn't have any doubt. For me, it was enough to see one person. If I could see that one person had recovered, then I didn't have any doubt that I could. And at that point, I had seen many people who had. So that's what was going through my head.
Yeah. And I have seen that quality in people on my channel, others too. And they said, like, if they can do it, why can't I? Versus like, oh, something is uniquely broken with me. If you truly believe something is uniquely broken with you, this modality probably is not the right one. There might be other modalities for you to support your recovery.
I agree with you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's getting to that place because I feel some people might still be in that, oh, I need to do the mitochondria stuff. I need to do this and that. So I had gotten to a place where I was in a healthy environment, but I wanted to live my life again and not have to live in a bubble. You called it the string. I also want to say that, like yourself, wasn't in a place where I was pushing through anymore. I had already come to the conclusion many times that I was no longer going to try to prove myself to others, that I was a good person or try to push through. I was always going to put my health first. And I'm not saying anyone brings this on themselves, but to heal from this, I did have to get to a place where I was creating healthy boundaries and I wasn't pushing through. And then I found the neuroplasticity and then it worked for me. Sorry, I was like talking a long time. This is your interview. But yeah, because you've spoken about healthy boundaries before, and I want to talk about that aspect. And when did you start creating healthier boundaries and dealing with that throughout your journey?
So for me, the LP wasn't enough. So I experienced this and I was like, wow, oh my God, I am well. And then I would get a text message from my mom and I would have a symptom 5 minutes later. And I was like, what? I thought we were past this. And then I would do the LP and I'd be okay. And then I'd run into someone in the street who reminded me of something. When I was experiencing triggers, I didn't quite know what they were at first. I just noticed that happened and I feel ill again. And it was usually, and I say usually because it was usually psycho-emotional, but the times in which it happened when I was on a walk was not because of the exercise, but because of my state. What I was thinking, I remember once I was on a walk, on like a long walk around a lake, and then I got a phone call and I decided to answer it. And after half an hour of the call, I started to feel the heat that I explained earlier, which was my base basic symptom of knocking on the door and saying, you're doing old neurology, so the heat. And then after that, I felt horrible for a few days.
From this phone call?
Yeah, not from the exercise, because I had been on multiple walks and exercise and done yoga and been running. So it's not so much the exercise, even for post-exertional malaise, except for when we are highly dysregulated. It's what's happening in our physiology when we exercise. And I was engaging in old patterns on this phone call. And, it activated that stress neurology, the old dysfunctional patterns. And that's okay, ultimately. And after a few days, I was better again. But I was still like oscillating back and forth a little bit. So with your question with boundaries, I got into trauma healing through my body, through somatics. And that's when I really learned about my true self, who I am, what boundaries actually mean, and what being in alignment with myself actually means, and how this translates into my life.
And I think there is so much nuance to this because yes, it sounds like the neuroplasticity, the visualizations, and elevating your state were clearly essential for your recovery, but being able to build your resilience and being able to address why you had these triggers and then move through them. Can you talk about the somatic trauma work that you actually did and what it actually looks like? Because I know there's different modalities for trauma work.
Yeah. So in the past, I had done traditional therapy. Never helped me personally with my anxiety. It helps unpack ideas and understandings and release, but stuff that is in our nervous system stays when we talk. It doesn't move as much as when we use our body. So
you're just going through the story of what happened and you might understand it better, but the impact is still there in your nervous system, is what you're saying.
Yes. So I came across somatic experiencing, which is a technique, a therapy modality by Peter Levine, who is a trauma therapist and researcher. And I love his work. And the session looked like me lying down. It was on Zoom. So it wasn't a barrier to be over Zoom because it worked amazingly for me. So I was lying down and the practitioner asked me to talk a little bit about what the tip of the iceberg would look like in any of the instances where I had had a setback. So the tip of the iceberg, I came to learn, is a text message from my mom. And the iceberg under the water is our dynamic of anxious attachment and all the stuff, all of, my childhood and my response, which shows up in many different ways through various patterns. And so in somatic experiencing, you go to the tip of the iceberg, you experience the text message or the trigger, not the experience of the trauma, the memory, what happened. And then you wait and you wait. And there's a technique called tracking where you learn to dive in. And the way, even for people who have dissociative patterns, so who struggle to connect with the body, this is a safe way because before you do it, you connect with your senses rather than your feelings. So what do you hear? What can you smell? And by doing this, you draw awareness away from your prefrontal cortex, from your thinking brain, and into the lower parts of your brain, your autonomic responses. And so when you're lying there, it's very bizarre, but it's very fascinating and amazing. When you experience the tip of the iceberg after you have learned how to dive into your body, which can take a few sessions depending on what's going on with you, you learn to feel where the trigger is happening in your body. For me, starts around my rib cage. I feel a warmth, I feel a shake, a tremble. Then the tremble moves across my chest and then into my throat. Sometimes it moves to my back. And then if I experience it for a few seconds too much, I start to shake a little bit. And through somatic experiencing, you're not running the story of the trauma. You're simply being with the energy in the body. And this kind of approach is so important for this kind of work, because sometimes, especially with CFS, and let me know what you think, but when we engage in the psycho-emotional side too much, it can really affect us and send us back into patterns, into old neurology where we are experiencing all the stuff again. But when we connect with a trigger, so our wounds and our coping mechanisms, our survival body, through the body rather than through the monkey mind, it starts to move and to shift. So in CFS, we scan our body for symptoms. How am I feeling? What am I doing? Oh my gosh, and we have to train ourselves out of that. But with this, it's more of staying with the feeling connected to the trigger and then becoming curious. And when you become curious, it doesn't turn into fear, into scanning. It literally turns into this energy that either goes away, lessens, moves. And then my practitioner was very skilled in inner child work and parts work. So when we would connect with the energy, ask it, what do you need? And these kind of inner conversations with our parts of self really help our whole self to understand, have a better understanding of what's going on. And when I entered that world, that's truly, Liz, for me, where everything changed forever. Not only my health and my wellness, but just my relationships with people, how I show up for myself, just everything really.
That's so amazing, Jennifer. And you really explained that well. Of course, it makes me curious. But yeah, you're feeling where it is in the body, and then it can begin to shift versus just going into the mind and thinking through something, which can sometimes keep us stuck for a lot of people. That's very powerful. So can you describe what parts work is? I'm curious about that.
Yes, there's this assumption or theory that all the experiences that we've lived in our life have a space within us, in our body. And there is the unbroken true self, the one that is our gut intuition, the inner knowing, which I had lost the connection with my inner compass. I didn't know what was right from what was wrong for me. And doing this work allowed me to, wow, it's this thing that happens. I don't know if you can resonate with this, but it's this gut feeling that part of me just knows whether that's a good thing for me or not, or I need to set a boundary. So connecting with true self, with that part that is it's always inside of us from our whole life. And it's the part of us that isn't conditioned by all the other parts.
And that's so important, I think, for recovery, because people are so overwhelmed trying to heal in someone else's perfect way that doesn't actually exist, because we had to heal our own way. And whether that was through one program or through 5 different modalities, it had to align with us. And then we got to the point where we knew, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it this way. And then I'll do a little bit of that. And it looks different for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that says so much about us. We are given a limited amount of resources for this very complex illness, and yet we manage to heal ourselves without a pill, without specific direction. And that says so much about us as humans, our ability to naturally do what we are made for, which is find balance. Our physiology is consistently going back to looking for homeostasis and balance. Our mind also is looking for safety, for balance. So I think what you said is beautiful. Yeah.
All right. So can you just tell me about your life now after this powerful transformation? So you had CFS, was it a little over 3 years?
Yeah.
And you've been experiencing full health and alignment for the past year or so?
Yeah, it's been amazing in the sense that I just want to make sure that whoever is watching this knows that this is coming from a place of honesty, alignment. Honestly, there's no sense within me that I am pushing any fake, let's say, picture of positivity, or it's just how it feels. You know, this work made me dive to the bottom of my stuff and clean it up, understand, become aware, and rebirth, literally. So I have never felt as well as I have in the last year or so. And not only CFS wise, but health wise as well. Like in our past experience, my boyfriend would always be the one to not get ill, and I was sick all the time. He has been ill like 3 times, and I have sailed through without getting anything. And he's like, what is happening? And I really do feel that my immune system, my hormones, I just feel this normalizing where it should be. There's no superhuman quality here. It's just where I should be navigating in that window of tolerance. So,
and I want to say, you had a rough go. You had all these crazy symptoms, but you were able to transform that and find your homeostasis. Because I do know people, they're like, I'm too far gone, but it is possible to have everything wrong and then actually feel amazing and be in alignment and have that homeostasis. Yeah, this is just such an inspiring story. And I love how you also say it's not that you're particularly special, but you are honest in the fact that you were ready for this. This is what resonated with you, and you committed to this work. And I just am so honored to share your story. It's really inspiring.
thank you so much. And I just wanted to add on to that. In feeling well and aligned, I didn't go back to my life as it was. I am living a completely different style of being.
Yes, I myself did not go back to working in marketing and user research for things that did not ignite my soul, to say the least. So can you talk about the work you're doing now? Can you talk about your calling?
I feel like even before I became ill, like with what I was doing, going into physio and as a body worker, helping people, I was always interested in injuries and overcoming injuries because I myself had had this career crushing injury. And I feel like my mission on this earth is really to help people overcome what I overcame, in the sense that through the lived experience and the wisdom that came to me through the healing, I just feel in service of others to share this, whether it resonates or not, but I feel the need to share this and to spread as much as I can the message of it's more than hope, isn't it? It's more than hope. I wish there was a better word for hope. Like this expansive growth, hope level of true selfness, whatever.
Yeah, because it sounds like, it's not like you're completely opposite of who you once were, because you always had that desire to help other people, but it was overcoming physical injuries. And this is that excitement about helping people transform their health and their life.
Yes, and I'm so excited for what's to come. It feels natural. I wake up and I'm like, oh, I really want to share this thing because, it changed my life. Or another day I'll be like, oh my God, that thing that happened. I need to say it. I need to share it. I need people to know, because if it gives them a tiny bit of what it gave me, then it will change their life. So yeah, so mind body practitioner, training in lots of different areas. Trauma informed is my most favorite paradigm to be in. Trauma informed means being aware of the parts of people, of the levels of being, of all the different energy levels of people. And that is holistic to like another level. It's not only the mind and the body, but all the parts of you as well. So I feel very passionate about that. And yeah, and we've created this program that we're very excited with, Carden Rabin, who was my somatic experiencing practitioner. And yeah, it encompasses brain retraining and trauma healing and somatics, applied polyvagal theory, and just all the things that we felt and I hear from other people's beautiful recovery that are important parts of getting back to you, coming back home to you, which I feel is the real work. The real work isn't getting rid of the symptoms. The real work is coming home to you, being in alignment, living a life you love, again, not in a fake positivity way, but truly waking up and feeling authentic joy. And yeah.
That's so beautiful. And that's amazing that you've teamed up with the person who helped you to create this comprehensive offering to help people on their healing journey. That's so beautiful.
It's so amazing though. And the more I speak to people and work with people, the more it's just so clear that we've been separated from ourselves because of all the layers. Mm-hmm. And coming back to us and being aligned and is really what creates a regulated physiology, because there is no sense of threat, of fear, of stress. You are living in a state of calm and joy. And if there is that, you're like, as you said, this resiliency around the stress that's very important as well.
Yeah. How can people contact you?
On Instagram is my mode of being of service to the greater collective.
And you put up such great stuff. It's like, I want to share everything every day. I'm like, I think I'm sharing too much. I share so much of your stuff in my stories because it's really great wisdom. Yeah, this was so wonderful, Jennifer. I am just honored to share your story. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening over there in London.
I'm so honored to be here as well and experience your light as well, because you've had an amazing journey yourself. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yay. Woohoo. Okay.